So welcome everybody. I'm so excited that you're here no matter what level you're at with Flash. I am going to be doing a lot of screen sharing today, so be prepared for that. We're going to look at some images that show us how Flash can be used, why off-camera Flash is usually better than on-camera Flash, and to kind of demystify it a little bit. And I'll talk a little bit more about my background too, so that will make me less intimidating as well, because I'm sure at this point you're very intimidated by me. Okay, let me go to share screen. And I will also give you opportunities to ask questions as well.
I'm just gonna stop you before you keep going, because
Yeah.
that photo that was your background, right there shows people we can trust you.
Oh, thank you. We're going to see that a couple images like that in the beginning of this presentation as well. So these are some sample images. And can you confirm, Samantha, I have the correct screen share up? You can see my logo and stuff. Okay.
Yes, I can see it all.
Cool. So I use off-camera Flash in a variety of ways. I'm primarily a wedding photographer, so I love using Flash to be able to not just create dramatic images, but also just correct bad light. And you'll also see some portrait work that I do here, like the senior. I do work like this, very simple sunset type stuff. I do work like this at my engagement sessions, where I take time to be able to create something really unique for people. And I do stuff like this, where you might not think that Flash has evolved, but Flash allowed me to do a lot less editing with these images. By the way, please, please, please drop questions in the chat. They may be questions that I can answer during this webinar. They might be questions I'll have to address in a different format, but I want to hear your questions so that I can know that you're getting what I'm saying or not getting, and what information that you need. This is another example of an image that used Flash, but in a very subtle way. So I want to show you these examples because sometimes people feel like Flash has to be a certain look, and it really doesn't. You can learn to use Flash in a way that complements your particular style of shooting. However, this is where I started with Flash. This was my first wedding using Flash. FYI, I was also a terrible photographer in general. This was, I think, I want to say 2006. And I used a kit camera and lens with a pop-up flash and a little napkin stuffed in it because I thought it was too strong. So this is meant to show that wherever you're at right now, I feel pretty confident saying you're definitely farther along than I was when I started. Okay, so already give yourself a hand because you didn't do this. All right, Erin, you're correct. We all have to start somewhere. Kelly, I'll answer that just real quickly. Not always, but often. So here's a quick comparison from 2007 to 2015. 2007, as you can see, I was starting to be able to get things in focus. So there's that. But obviously, Flash work was not on point. But I knew that it was something that I was going to need because I kept running into really dark scenarios. I was terrified. I felt super stressed. I felt under pressure because, oh my God, the first dance is about to start and I have no idea what's happening. And slowly over time, I learned how to use Flash in a way that made not only better images, but made me feel more comfortable, made me feel more confident, and allowed me to focus on more important things like being able to direct my clients and being able to create interesting images. So 2015, I really kind of hit my stride, found my style. I would say I started getting good with Flash probably around 2011, 2012, but it took a really long time because I was self-taught. And because like we talked about before we kind of started here, it was really, really hard to find information that was understandable to a beginner. And that was worded in a way that wasn't intimidating. So the first thing we need to understand about light and about Flash is that light is light. It doesn't matter whether it comes from the sun, whether it comes from a lamp, whether it comes from a flash, whether it comes from the business end of a lightning bug. All light follows the same rules. And so you already know a lot about light, and all of that information can transfer to Flash. You already know what the image is going to look like when you place your subjects facing the sun, or putting the sun behind them, or when the sun is coming through clouds. All of that directly applies to how Flash works. So you're not really starting from the beginning. You're starting midway. So these two images are from the same session. One is with Flash and one is with not. what is not. And both are really interesting, beautiful images because of the quality of light. So flash is not something you always have to use, but it gives you a greater amount of variety. Ultimately, though, it's always the same principles over and over and over. So sometimes natural light just needs a little bit of help, like in this image. Sometimes natural light is great on its own. This is just natural light. And sometimes the natural light sucks. Like straight up, I cried when I edited these images, just a little bit. It was terrible. But this is during a ceremony where I don't have control over where I put the people, right? I'm just dealing with what I'm given. Now, sometimes with natural light, you do have control. You can move your subjects around, you can put them in a different place, but especially if you're a wedding photographer or if you're a portrait photographer who wants to not just do sessions once a day at 7 p.m., then you need to be able to deal with situations like this where maybe the natural light just isn't great. So when you master flash, you have options and you have control. All of these images were from the same session. The bottom one is natural light, the top are flash. And if you notice in the top image there, if I hadn't used flash, I would not have gotten that look. I would not have seen the blue sky. The faces would have been completely dark, so I would have had to bump up my exposure and would have lost the entire background. Now this family owns this orchard. They wanted to see the background. They specifically wanted to see the background to use these images on their website. And so had I only had natural light, I would have been stuck to very small amount of areas that I could use to take pictures. Having flash and feeling comfortable with it, not just having it, but feeling comfortable with it, meant that I could say, yeah, no big deal. Let's go over here. This looks great. I like this background and I'm gonna do the light how I want it. It also makes editing much easier. Even in wedding situations where you need to get up and go, you can do it very quickly. I don't know how many of you are familiar with MSU. I live super close to MSU. They do tons of weddings every year. It's ridiculous how many weddings, to be honest with you. This is the Sparty statue. There is no parking next to the Sparty statue. So you pull over in the party bus, you run outside, you have 5 minutes, you take your picture, you get back on the bus, you leave before you get arrested. So even in this scenario, you can feel confident, you can feel comfortable, you can bust out this picture and leave and get an image straight out of camera, like the one on the right is there, that you can feel confident about. We also talked about just having those options. Again, this session, for whatever reason, and they were the sweetest couple and their wedding was on point, it was amazing, but they took a super long time to get changed and had a lot of outfit changes. And so even though we started their session in really beautiful natural light, I had about 30 minutes of natural light and then they took so long to change clothes that it was pretty much dusk when we started doing these pictures. And because the one on the left here was in the middle of a deep forest, it was almost dark. But I still wanted a natural looking image, and being comfortable with flash allows you to choose between a really dramatic picture like the one on the right or a very natural one like the one on the left. So here's an image from one of my students who completed a course with me, Hannah. I don't know if she's here today. I thought I saw Hannah earlier, but this is a before and an after of using flash. And I'll flip through it a couple times. So we can dramatically change the reality of a scenario based on how we choose to use light. So we're used to just taking what we're given. We walk in, that's the light, whether it's good or not, we're just gonna have to deal with it. We wanna retrain our brains to instead think about things like background, like composition, things that are going to make that more interesting images, and to make our life easier are just images that have an easier time editing or posing. And then we can force the light to be whatever we want it to be, like we did in this image, or she did in this image. Flash doesn't have to overpower. This was a set of images contributed to me by another photographer. This image on the right, the layperson would probably never think that anything special was used in this image as far as lighting, but notice what a huge difference it made to their eyes and to just how relaxed and humanized they look. Flash can also save scenarios that we might have had to go to extremes to accomplish. This is the after image lit with flash. This image and this image have exactly the same aperture and shutter speed and ISO. All that changed was I turned on my flashes. However, this image, I would dare to say, looks very natural. Again, one more example of being able to just use fill flash to be able to open up an image. And imagine how much easier it is to edit things like acne, things like bags under the eyes, stuff like that, when you have the good light from the beginning. It also just allows us to get more creative. That first image would have been fine, probably needs a little bit higher exposure, a little bit editing that's straight out of camera, but the one on the right is something really special. It's something that the clients would be like, whoa, that's so cool, right? So it allows us to do more creative things. Now, something that's really, really important to wrap our minds around, because this is a little bit unique when we get into Flash, is that the goal is not to have more light. The goal is to have better light. Sometimes that means turning down the ambient light. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Sometimes it means being careful with our placement. Sometimes it means not using a lot of flash, but the goal is to have better light. So a lot of times I'll be in these groups and I'll hear people say, you know, well, I just really like natural light, and I've never been in a scenario where I need it because there's always enough. And that might be true. There's a lot of venues where you have, in a literal sense, enough light, but does that mean that it's good light? Not necessarily. So like in this picture, that first image, the light was okay. I could have made something good with that light, but it wasn't better light. The second image where the shadows are, the way that the light is composed makes it look much more, it pops a lot more. It makes it look much more professional. Here's another situation where we can use flash to our benefit in an outdoor scenario, and especially portrait photographers as well. This was like noon in July, and I wanted to be able to do a picture that showed that blue sky. Now, if you notice, I think you guys can see my cursor when I do this. Can you nod if you can see it? Yeah, okay. So notice back here, these bushes, how dark they are. That's how dark their faces would have been without flash. So it makes a huge difference. But again, if it's done correctly, if you feel comfortable with it, if you're used to using it, it can be done in a way that appears very natural. Now, to us as photographers, this looks a little flashy because we can tell that something's not quite right. But to a layperson, it looks perfectly natural and normal. Here's a before and after that is interesting, almost the same scenario. So this is an image that is not using flash. It's basically the best I could do with natural light, and this is straight out of camera. To be able to just expose for their skin tones. And it's an okay image. I would be proud to edit this and give it to my couple. But I like this better. This has much cleaner skin tones. The blue sky comes out a lot better. They are more defined. And again, flash allows us to work even in scenarios where it's almost pitch black outside. This is a senior that wanted a cool image, something different. She had a truck that she was really proud of, so we used that for the backlight behind her. This is just a pitch black forest. So there wasn't really anything else to do but use flash. And yet this senior in full sun, I can use flash to be able to make her image much more colorful, pop more. She was a very, very vivacious personality, and I felt like flash would bring that out better. So all of that is to say, this is important, right? This is something that will help you feel more comfortable, more excited, create better images. But now we're going to talk about why off camera, because I know a significant portion of photographers come to this point where they say, okay, well, yeah, I get it. Flash is important, and you know, absolutely, I work in dark reception halls and stuff. So I put a flash on my camera and I bounce it, and it looks okay. Maybe even I do like a backlight, and that's my 2-light system, and we're good. And if that's where you're at, that is awesome, because you have made amazing progress, and you are absolutely going to benefit from that knowledge. So why would we ever need to get all of our light off camera? We're going to talk about that in a second. Up to this point, does anybody else have questions? I'm going to wait like a few seconds here and see if anything new pops up in the flash or in the chat. All right, so it looks like everybody's getting excited about those images. That's great. So these two images that you see up here on the screen share are from the same wedding. The one on the left was taken by my assistant, who was also allowed to kind of just play around and learn some thget during reception when I didn't need her. And the second one is from me. Now, if you notice in this first image, composition and all that aside, because she's very new, we're cutting some slack on that one. You notice the light here. The light in her picture was connected to her. She had an on-camera flash that was bounced off the ceiling. When that's the case, you're creating a bubble of light that follows you around as you move. Yo, there we go. So wherever you're standing, that bubble of light expands out from you and hits everything else that in that direction, right? So what is the brightest thing in this image? It's this lovely lady's back. Is that the point of the image? No. Is that adding anything to the image? Certainly not. We know it's not in focus. She's not doing anything particularly interesting that we need to be in focus. So why is this the brightest and most focus pulling part? Because of on-camera flash. Added to this problem is the idea that since it's connected to you, that means that if you want to adjust how far you're shooting the subject, you either have to allow the flash to choose the power setting, or you have to be constantly changing the power setting. Otherwise, your images are going to be super, super inconsistent. If she was trying to shoot this person back here in the teal dress, look how dark they are. She'd have to stop, change all of her settings, or she'd have to allow the flash to make all the settings choices, which, let's be honest, is not great. So a lot of people get to this point with flash and they stop. They get to this point and they think, wow, flash is really inconsistent and sucks. And I just hate it. But they don't hate flash. They hate the limitations of on-camera flash. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes there are locations where on-camera flash works just fine, and it's exactly what you need for that scenario. But just like lenses, you don't use the same one for every scenario. There are times when you need a different tool. For me personally, I almost never use on-camera flash because it makes my job harder, because it means I have to think more, I have to work more. Whereas with off-camera flash, I can do things a little bit differently. Now, the one on the right, you probably didn't at first notice this shoulder because it's not part of the composition, it doesn't matter, but because it's not lit as much as our couple here. I'm able, when I set up off-camera flash, to set up lighting in a way that makes the subjects look good. Then, when I back up and I take images from any angle or any focal length or any distance, the light stays the same. Off-camera flash is much closer to just snapping your fingers and creating a window. As long as you put that window where you want it and makes the subject look good, you're free. You can do whatever you want. You can stand wherever you want, use whatever focal length you want. But when your flash is attached to your camera, it's like just having that window right here the whole time. It goes with you, and so it's always changing as you move. Here's another example. Again, a situation where somebody who wasn't as familiar with flash was just along at a wedding and was experimenting with me. They were my assistant for the day. This image is kind of all over the place, and primarily because of the lighting. Everybody here in the foreground that's not really contributing anything to the story is all lit first because the light was connected to her. Even if she's bouncing, even if she bounces it behind herself, even if she bounces it straight up, that light moves where she moves. And so it's not an interesting light. It's not a natural looking light, certainly. This is the same venue. Notice in this image, the foreground people add to the story because it's an interesting dance floor, but because they're not lit up, primarily we don't look at them. We don't register them as people. We look instead directly to the bride's face and to her body and arm, because that's what's lit. Is this all making sense? Everybody's kind of like nodding along, I see. I'm gonna check the chat real quick. Yeah, so some people are asking about technical strategies. So I wanna make it clear with this webinar that we're doing today, I'm not gonna be able to get into the kind of detail that you need to walk away completely ready to do everything with Flash. That's not the point of today. The point of today is to get you excited about Flash, to answer a few initial questions, to get you motivated to get started. I offer one-on-one classes that are going to absolutely answer all of those technical questions. I do it as a one-on-one because I want to deal with you personally. I want to answer your questions the way you need them to be answered. And I want to be able to say, okay, go get your camera. Even if we're online, I want to be able to say, go get your camera. We're going to practice this. Okay, do 1 step, 2 step, 3 step. Okay, and then how did that look? That way you can have a much firmer grasp of what we're talking about. Because if you're here, that means that those online things that you're reading, that means that those impersonal webinars you're watching probably hasn't worked. And you need something more personal. So that being said, let me look at a few more questions here. How many flashes do you use during a reception? From Samantha. So as many as I need is the answer. It's kind of like asking somebody, how many lenses do you use at a wedding? Maybe during one wedding I might use just one lens the whole day, but that's pretty unusual. It's pretty average for me to use 3 or 4 at a reception because I'm lazy, because I just want to set them up once and have the whole room covered with beautiful light. So doing 3 or 4 flashes allow me to do that. But it just really depends on the scenario. When I walk into a room, I ask myself, okay, what does the light look like? Is it good light or bad? Where does it not cover? And then I know where I need to add more light. How many lights? Let's see. Are you going to talk about light modifiers? I will a little bit if we have time. Yes, absolutely. And two, I'm going to give you the link to be able to see more information about my classes. Even if you're not ready to sign up for a class, please email me. Please just email me your questions. I'd be happy to direct you to where you can find the answers or to answer those questions for you. Okay. Do you miss any natural moments trying to get your flash in the right spot? I did at first, yes. Just like when you first started using your camera and you were trying to remember which one was the aperture button and you missed shots because of that, same scenario. But you get to the point where you don't really think about it anymore, your hands just do it. Right? Like when you're shooting, you're not really thinking about, oh, I have to do this f-stop and let me do the calculation of that. Your hands are just doing it because you're so used to it. And you'll get there with flash, but you have to get past that hump, that initial hump, right? That's why my classes are focused on a very a way of doing it through intuition and not through like charts and math and all that, because that's not how my brain works. I'd rather just intuitively know what I need to do. And so in order to do that, you have to be taught how to do that. Yeah, so Samantha said a lot of educators either do one on and off camera and say that that's all you need. And again, that's absolutely okay if that's working for you. And some days, there's days where I do that too, but you only have more options when you add more abilities, right? Not sure if it was answers. Do you have assistants holding stands? Oh, I love it when I can have an assistant. It's so convenient. Not always. A lot of times, most of the time when I'm at a wedding, I have somebody with me, whether it's a second shooter or an assistant, but that second shooter might be doing other things. So I might have to just go do it myself. But ideally, again, because I'm lazy, I like to set it up in a place that just works for the rest of the night. So I don't have to be moving it all the time. All right. And I also, and possibly we can talk about this later, I have a variety of stands and some of them are mini stands. So I can just pick them up and plunk them down and it's like super easy. Do you have to wait until the bride moves into the light? That's a great question. Are you doing handheld off-camera flash on stands? Always on stands. Again, see, lazy. And you have to wait until the bride moves into the light. Yes and no. That's something that will become more clear as we go on. Sometimes with off-camera flash, you do have to wait for your moment, but I feel like the moment is so much better when you do that I don't care about that part of it. But using off-camera flash, because you're filling up much more of the room than you are with one on-camera flash, it's much less likely that you'll miss moments. In fact, I would go so far as to say that your on-camera flash has probably trained you to not notice things. When you use an on-camera flash, you can only shoot things within a certain range of yourself before you have to stop and rearrange everything. And so a lot of people slap on a 50 millimeter, slap on an on-camera flash, and they only shoot in that zone. With off-camera flash, I've got 2 cameras, a 70 to 200 and a 35, and I can rock either one of those. I can shoot across the room, right in front of me, swap back and forth the whole night, and I don't have to stop and think about the light. So let's move on. If I can figure out how to change to the next image. Microsoft, what you doing with yourself? Come on out. There we go. Okay, so this is a little bit better of an example of on-camera flash. This is a second shooter that I use a lot, and she uses it more in her style. So this was one of the first weddings she shot with me before I got hold of her and slapped her around a little bit. So this was the groom getting ready. He was hugging his best man. This is a beautiful shot. I delivered it. I was happy to deliver it. However, there's things that could have been better. If we notice here, the brightest part of the image is his ear. Right? Now imagine how much better the light would have been had it been coming toward his face so that this part of his face was lit and then the rest of his face dropped into shadow. It would have made the moment much more expressive. Instead, we get a lot of his arm and his body here where we don't necessarily need it. Now in comparison, this image, which is lit from the side, has a lot of what we call drop off on her face and arm. It means that her arm looks a little more realistic in 3D. It can also have a slimming effect, but most importantly, it draws much more attention to the naturalness of her expression. Here's an example from my archives. The one on the left there is just a terrible, it's a terrible flash shot. But I was super proud of it at the time, and I had every right to be because I was very new with flash, and this was like a big success for me. But notice how flat they look, how so much attention is on his hand and her arm. Whereas in this image, because we have this drop off into darkness of all the parts of the body we don't need and of the background, it's a much more natural feeling image. With this image, we feel like maybe they're just being lit from the building over here onto the side of them. With this first image, it's absolutely flash, and it looks very flashy, right? Now, the only thing that changed between these two images is that I learned what I was doing. The equipment was the same. The modifiers are, I think I had a different umbrella, but it would have been the same idea. All that changed was me. So almost always, just like when people are having problems with their camera or with their lenses, almost always, it's just that we need more knowledge. We need to have more experience and confidence. So I'm looking at the chat here, just give me a second. Any tips for bridal suite or various getting ready rooms? We are gonna talk more about that. I'll circle back at the end, Erin. If you still have questions, let me know, but I feel like you're gonna pick up a lot from what we're still gonna be discussing. So I'm just gonna skip over that for now. Raj, if you have a low white ceiling, would you bounce your flashes? So that's one of those scenarios where an on-camera flash might be beneficial. If I, for example, like I think last year I shot a cocktail hour with like 400 people in a hallway, okay? And the ceiling was like an 8-foot ceiling. I was shooting like this. I'm not setting up stands. Even if the light would have looked better, I'm not setting up stands. This is grip and grins during cocktail hour. I'm not about it. I'm just gonna throw on a on-camera flash, I'm gonna bounce it off the ceiling, I'm gonna call it good. Right? When you're doing grip and gins, it doesn't matter for the distance factor. I don't need it to be a super ultra portrait, right? Like just get it done. So there's situations like that where yes, I would use on-camera flash, but on-camera flash is never going to be the best light. It's only gonna be, this is what I can do in this scenario. Does that make sense? So here's a fun example. This image was shot with flash. I was bouncing off of, it was a really weird setup. There was like these pillars, but they were really thick pillars in front of where the head table was. And so I had my flashes on the other side of them from me, so that they were bouncing into the pillars and then the light would kick back into the faces of the people at the head table. Now, you might look at this and say, I could do that with on-camera flash. The problem is I was standing here, okay? So these images are the exact same settings, exact same lens, everything's the same, trusty 70-200. I can stand here and get a variety of faces, get a variety of looks, but the light stays consistent. Because again, the light is not attached to me. The light is attached to the subjects. So when I set up lights, I'm going into the room and I'm thinking, where are my subjects gonna be? What direction are they gonna face? And then where do I need the light to be to fill them in? It's that simple. Once I've achieved that, once I say, okay, the light on them looks good, then I'm done thinking about flash for the rest of however long speeches is. And I just wander around and get cool pictures. Now, if you're a wedding photographer, you know that this guy here, if you had an on-camera flash, would be blasting light back at your camera and you'd get a nice, shiny, sparkly bald head, which is just what every guy wants to see when he looks at these pictures, right? Terrible, terrible. And you're sitting there and you're trying in Photoshop desperately to like drop the exposure, you're like scribbling on his head, like, come on, why did you have to sit here, right? So with off-camera flash, this is so much easier. I'm able to actually see a little bit of the background because I can take my ambient settings down a little bit, more on that later. I'm able to get a variety of faces, I'm able to move around, and yet while these people in the foreground are contributing to the story of the image, they're not the focus. And this is pretty close to straight out of camera. I see a couple of questions excitingly popped up. So in this image, to answer the questions about where the flash is, immediately out of frame on both the right and the left are two big white pillars. So on the side of the pillars away from me, the flashes are up against the pillars, bouncing into them, so that basically light is coming from the pillars into their faces. I see people nodding, so hopefully that made sense. Here's another example of great off-camera flash opportunity. I can climb up on this balcony, take this cool shot, run back downstairs, keep shooting, and not change anything. Consistency and laziness Those are my priorities. Um, but this is a beautiful venue. If I had my camera on flat, let me back that up. I'm getting way too excited. Calm down, Heather. If I had my flash on my camera and I bounced it from here, I would have lost that chandelier. I would have lit up everybody in the foreground. I would have not had a consistency of lighting across their faces, and it would not, frankly, have been a very interesting image. What makes this image interesting is where the shadows are. The shadows are what define a 3D object. It's what tells our brains that this is natural and this is the way things are supposed to look. When light is too flat, which often is the case with bounced on-camera flash, we don't get this look. You can go from here and make it less dramatic or more dramatic. You can make it look a little bit more filled in or not. That just depends on style. But the placement of off-camera flash gives you that freedom. Everybody likes that consistent and lazy. Actually, you know what? It's not lazy. It's energy efficient. So here's some cool images. This is a before flash and after. Same camera settings on both. The second one I just turned on my flash. The second one I will say too is a little bit edited. That's why the colors are a little bit stronger. I was too lazy to print off the straight from camera, but it's close enough. It makes a huge difference, right? So looking at that shadowed image, you know, just from your regular shooting, you can kind of picture in your head what this would look like if you were just to turn up the exposure to expose for their faces. What would happen to the background? It'd be gone. You'd see maybe like a little tree line, but that's not very helpful. Now, I did take some natural light images because they're easy and like, why not? But I had the time, I had the experience, I had somebody to go run to my car and get my huge umbrella, so I didn't have to. So like, why not? I'll make a cool extra image. And it's an image I can sell to the venue. Well, not sell, but, you know, get things for. It's an image that I can use online so that when people are searching for this venue, they're like, whoa, right? This is a sellable image. That's really, really important to be able to do. Got a question here about umbrellas or softboxes. Yes. We're gonna hopefully have some time to talk about modifiers, but that's something I cover really extensively in my one-on-ones, because modifiers, I'm trying to think of how to explain this without going down the rabbit hole, because I'm super excited about modifiers because I'm a huge nerd. Just like lenses, there's 100 million thousand choices and it's easy just to buy. But the truth is you probably just need one or two really high quality things that fit how you shoot. And so it's much more helpful for you to get that information from me on a one-on-one where I can find out how you shoot, where you shoot, what your style is, and recommend the right thing for you personally. In general though, the bigger the modifier, the prettier the light. It's just, you kind of run into the problem of how annoying is this thing to carry around. We would all love like a 12-foot umbrella, but it's not gonna happen, right? This is another example of an interesting sellable image that's unique that only takes a few seconds to set up. In a religious ceremony where the church is their home church or where it's important to them, this kind of image is a big deal to them. And yet it took like 4 seconds to set up. Again, this is an interesting image specifically because the light was off camera, because we've lost most of his face to the darkness. Our eyes go right to his eyes. It's a really beautiful way to be able to command attention in a composition. Here's another example. As people are moving in and out, I have set up my light and I'm just sitting back and letting things happen. I set up my light before she even got there. I asked a bridesmaid, hey, stand right here real quick, model for me. Work it, girl, all right. And then once she moves out of the way, the bride comes in, I'm ready to go. Here is how the setup looked. I'm the little short one there. I had a flash that I pointed away from the bride so that it would bounce into the wall and then back into her face. You can tell from this image that her face is pretty dark. Whereas when I go back, I can see the windows. I wanted them to be a little bit blown out so I wouldn't be too distracted, but I haven't lost all the image detail of the window lines. I don't know what they're called. And her face is lit beautifully. More interestingly, when this person comes in to help her, the focus is still on the bride's face because the light is not connected to me. It does not hit this bridesmaid first. It hits the bride's face first. Is that making sense? Let's see some nodding. All right, cool. Here's another great example, dramatically different images, like dramatically, right? Super crazy blown out window behind this bride. Every table and every surface was covered. I realistically couldn't really move her at this point without being a huge pain in the butt to the makeup and hair people. Sometimes I will ask them to move, don't get me wrong, again, lazy, but in this scenario, I didn't have to because it was just as easy for me to set up a flash. So in the second image, I take my camera settings, I can drop them down to the point where the background isn't blown out, and then I just let the flash fill her in. But again, this is a more natural looking image because it's off camera, because we can see shadows on her face. Those shadows and that shadow placement gives her face that three-dimensional quality and is much more flattering. Ha, she does look like Taylor Swift, you're right. Even when I'm second shooting, I love it when I'm able to bust out my flash. It makes you much more sellable as a associate or a second photographer as well with images like this, because a lot of times the main photographer has so many things happening and so much they have to juggle that it is much more convenient for them if you say, hey, I'm gonna go set up for a rain shot outside. You just let me know, is that okay? While you're shooting this, I can go do that. Awesome, go set it up. Right? So I can take care of these extra images for them. They can get cool images to give their clients and look super awesome, well, without them having to tell me what to do, without them having to juggle every part of the day. So I'm getting a question here. Do you usually point the light somewhere to bounce light back and not direct toward your subject? So again, we talked about in the beginning how natural light has a lot of different qualities, and we've just kind of learned how to work with natural light, right? All of us like windows, but none of us really like direct light through windows, for example. Does that make sense? So the same way with flash, there's situations where direct flash is going to look super cool, like that image of the groom with that I just showed you with the stained glass, that was direct light. But most of the time we want it a little bit softened. So just like natural light, what do you do to soften natural light? You get in the shade and let it hit directly, or you allow it to bounce off a reflector, or you put a diffusion over it like closing a curtain. Same way with flash. If I want it to look softer, I've either got to get it in a bigger modifier, in a modifier that will soften it by putting something white over it, or I've got to bounce it into something where it will diffuse on its way back. Here's an image of an okay-ish flash image. They look okay, they're lit okay, it's not very interesting. This is better. So again, having off-camera flash took a patch of grass and a little bit of drizzle and made it something incredible. These clients, I've shot them at 3 weddings now, their own wedding, and then 2 other weddings where it happened to be raining again. And they were like, Heather, can we do another rain shot real quick? Are you done for the day? Like, can we go outside and do another rain shot to update for our anniversary? It's amazing, it's great. They still talk about this. It's a big deal to them. And honestly, it's not really that hard. One of the most frustrating parts of flash to me is that the ones where I have to work really hard and do the settings and change all the stuff a million times are usually family formals. They're like, cool, thanks. And then like images like this that I bust out in like 3 seconds, they're like, oh my God, you know, it's just the photography burden. Y'all feel me. Again, another scenario, this gives you an idea of how dark it was in this forested area. He is lit with flash in the front. And I used the backflash not to hit him, but to illuminate the background trees. I also changed the color of the flash as well to give it that dramatic light that looks like sunset. This is a huge, huge difference. And this is another example of good versus more light, right? Now I could have taken this image and just brightened up the background, but the trees would not have looked like this. Is that making sense? This is another image where that light in the background is flash. The sun had already gone down. Again, they took way too long to change. What is it with my clients? They took a really long time to change. They look good though. There was still enough residual light where the front of them were bright enough. I didn't feel like I needed to use flash, but I wanted something of interest in the background, and I wanted to be able to light up some of that grass to make it look interesting. So while they were taking forever to get changed, I trucked all the way to the back of this field and set down a flash. It was a cool image. It was worth it. This image is another image that this couple talked about for a long time. These 4 guys at the end of each of their weddings have gone out to share a beer and have a cigar in the parking lot. It's their tradition. They've done it. I think the first guy got married like 6 or 7 years before this. It was a big deal to them. They were best friends from childhood. I was on my way home. I was taking all my stuff out to my car, and it's the end of the night and you're like so tired. And I saw them over there and I was like, oh, I gotta do something, I guess, right? So I went over, I slapped a flash on the back of their truck, I posed them, I took the shot. They were blown away. And it was very, very simple to do. But it was only simple because I had the previous knowledge of how this works. I knew right away how to do my settings. I knew right away in my head how it was going to look. And so it was very easy for me. You can get there too. You can get to the point where you can see scenarios like this before you take that shot. Where you can look at a situation and say, well, I could shoot it with natural light, or I could do this. And that is an awesome feeling to have. So some people are asking questions if I only use speed lights. No, I'm a big nerd. I have a lot of stuff. It's a little bit of a problem. I'm going to be real with you. It's a little bit of a problem. I have speed lights. I have video lights. I have strobes. I have in between speed light and strobes. Again, that's all stuff that I cover in my one-on-one because I want you to be familiar with not only what they're called, but what they do, when you would need them, if you need them. I don't want you to just run out and buy a bunch of stuff. Okay, because it's not going to help. If you don't know how to make awesome images with what you already have, it's not going to help. I want to get you to the point where you feel comfortable with what you have and or help you buy your first flash. Let me get to you first before you blow your money. And then we can start talking about other things that may solve problems that you have. Because flash is not about buying a cool new gadget that's going to fix everything for you. Because honestly, it's not. It's about your knowledge. But there are tools that can just solve convenience issues for you or make things easier to set up. And yes, Sandy, this is only one flash. You can do cool things like this. This is a flash, composite. So I actually shot like 4 different images and pasted it together later, which is a huge pain in the butt, but it looked pretty cool. Erin, I will tell you more about these one-on-ones because I am very excited and very caffeinated. So this is another image example. Now you'll notice, here's something interesting that you'll notice. When you start using flash and you start training your brain away from the idea that you just have to use the light you're dealt. Once you get your brain in this zone where you say, the reality is the background, the people, the subjects. The light is whatever I want it to be. Thank you very much. All of your images will reach a level of consistency. If you notice the face of my bride in this picture, how the background looks, the light on her, let's go back to this image. It's the same light, you guys. It's the same thing. It's the same thing as this. It's the same thing as this. All that's happening is I'm swapping out the backgrounds, right? I might have to use different tools to achieve that light happening, but the light is always the same. That allows you to develop your own style of lighting and allows you to be consistent no matter what the situation is. Sandy, I love you too. And by the way, this wedding on the right was that couple that I said took forever to change. Their wedding was amazing. And the dance floor was just completely bonkers. This wedding, it rained all day and it was in Detroit. So it's not like we could just leave easily and go somewhere else because everywhere you need a permit or you need to like own the place. He was one of the developers who helped restore this building. So we had access to this building. And if I didn't have flash, frankly, I would have been screwed. Not only could I make images here, I could make beautiful images. And I could just forget about what the light was like and focus on picking out cool backgrounds and then light them. This one on the right is actually my second shooter. A benefit of the system that I use, which is Godox, is that my second shooters and I can share triggers and set up one light and both use the same light. More on that in the one-on-ones. Again, stop buying crap you don't need. So this was a cool location. We were able to do a lot in it. So here's a before and after I'm about to show you. This is a familiar gut aching problem that I'm sure you've had when you're at the venue and everybody's looking at you and you have 10 minutes to do 30 shots and nobody is wanting to talk to each other and there's that rude aunt who keeps adding more combinations and you're really stressed and hungry. That's not me, right guys? Like, please tell me it's not just me. Okay, good. You're just like ready to slap everyone. And added to that, it's usually a terrible lighting scenario, just straight up bad. So this is an example where more light is not helpful. What you need is better light, because I don't want to be annoyed doing this and annoyed editing this, right? So instead, I can use flash. I'm going to bounce really quickly between these two so that you can see them as they're changing the face light. Can you imagine the amount of editing this would take to make it look like this? This is almost straight out of camera. I like color corrected and stuff. I did like zits and pimples and stuff. Goodbye grain, exactly. So not only is this more light, it's just straight up better light. They look better here. They don't have these bags under their eyes. I can control where the shadows are. If you notice in this one, look at this poor girl's chest is completely blown out. The top of her head is all blown out. Not now, right? So starting with a base knowledge of Flash and being able to build on it and feel comfortable with it, working with somebody like me who can answer your questions, get you in a routine so that you can start doing things consistently, you will be able to set this up without even thinking about it. Not the first time, but like the third time. Again, another one of those examples where I could shoot with the natural light and blow out the sky, or I could make something cool. Those are my two choices. They wanted this specific location, they wanted these specific vines, and I was able to get really cool blue and really cool green. The groom was very drunk, so I had to work very quickly because he was ready to get back on the bus and party. So here's a little bit of a pullback situation. There's actually two lights here. You can't see the left one, but you can see where I'm just bouncing off of that wall over there. Now, some people will say, well, Heather, if you're bouncing, well, then what's the difference between that and an on-camera bounce? Well, like we've talked about, though, if it was attached to me, then everything in the axis line of my camera would be lit up. Instead, I'm on the shadowed side, which means I have much more of that 3D look. It's a much more comfortable, natural image. If you notice too, you can't really see because of the composition that I chose. The bride is right here, but the light is such that if I wanted to scoot myself over a little bit and take a picture of her, the light's already good on her. When I set up my lights, I try to set them up in a way where I can shoot from a maximum amount of angles and a different amount of styles, and then just stop thinking about the light because it's already good. The bride looks 10 years older in the first one. It's true. And you can bounce off anything, you guys. You might lose a lot of the light and it might not work great, but you can do it. This was an outdoor wedding. I was second shooting. I didn't have, the main shooter didn't think that we needed to bring anything as far as like softboxes and stuff, so I didn't have it with me because I hadn't learned that lesson yet. Now I know. So we just had our bounce cameras, but then they switched to an outdoor dance floor. What are we gonna do? Now we could turn it around and do direct flash, and that would have been fine. It's just a little harsher, and it's not really, doesn't really fit her style. So I convinced her, like, we can bounce off this railing. It's just that because it's only one side, we can only really shoot from this one side, but small dance floor, it'll be fine. So being able to find solutions is really important. And you can absolutely bounce off dark wood, you can bounce off black, you can bounce off any surface. The problem is that if it's a dark surface, it'll just eat more power. So on my one-on-one, we talk about situations like that. We talk about, especially if you're somebody who shoots in a lot of dark venues or barn venues, specific things that you can do to help with that. So actually I'm getting a question here about bouncing off white so you don't have color cast. So that is correct, you will get color cast. There's, in some situations, there's a venue near me that has a, for the love of God, has a fuchsia, a hot pink fuchsia getting ready room. Okay, it's ridiculous. First of all, it's super like, why? But anyway, if I were to bounce off that, yes, I would get a pink cast to that image. Now, if that's the only source of light, you could probably just white balance color correct for it later, but it's not ideal. In those scenarios where there's a very strong color tone, I will instead bounce into an umbrella or bounce through a softbox or something like that. My theory is bouncing is better, and if you can't bounce, bring your own thing to bounce into, right? Lazy. Now, a lot of people will carry that idea and they'll say, well, then I can't bounce in a barn because barns are brown and brown is a color. Well, yes, but remember the rest of the color of the light in the room is probably those orange twinkle lights. So when you bounce off of orange or brown, as the case may be, it's going to come back closer to that color and it's going to look better anyway. So it's really not a problem. ultimately, don't be scared. Just try it. Or ask people like me who know everything. So this is where you can sign up for my one-on-ones or see more information. We're not done yet. We've got a lot more to go, but I just wanted to throw this out here. You can also see it on my Zoom name. I added my website there. You can either sign up for a one-on-one, or you can just sign up for emails about Flash, or you can just fill in the form and ask me a question. Send me an email. Call me, beat me if you want to reach me. Nobody else got that. I see you, Crystal. I see you smiling. So please look that up. I also have on that website some really cool sliders. I'm gonna be honest with you. Sometimes I just pull it up and I slide the sliders back and forth and laugh because it's just funny to see like before and after Flash. I'm easily amused. What can I say? Okay, so moving on. Oh, I have a couple questions. Hold on. Oh, okay. So she does need to wrap up at 1:20. So we're gonna speed through the rest of this here. In the one-on-one, we're going to talk about how the exposure triangle fits Flash in with the settings you need on your camera, because people don't realize, but 80% of how your images look is not anything to do with the Flash. It has everything to do with the settings you choose on your camera. And that is why you're so frustrated about your Flash not working or not looking right. Shutter speed in Flash makes a huge difference in being able to do cool things like this image. Choosing your settings, again, super important for being able to manipulate how the light looks. Here's a situation that just shows a real quick example of that. The top left is reality. The bottom left is what I forced reality to look like, and the right side is the result. Those are camera settings, not Flash settings. In the one-on-one, we'll talk about modifiers. I'll show you pullbacks of the types of modifiers I use, what situations need which modifiers, and why. Because I don't want you wasting money on stuff just because somebody says it's cool. I want you to have a tool that works for the situation you need. We're going to talk about gels and how changing the color of your Flash dramatically affects how flashy it looks or doesn't look. We'll talk about how to face challenges like this where you can't move the subject and you're stuck with what you have. And we'll talk about DJ lights, the bane of my existence. No more. This is the same wedding, the same setup, before and after Flash. I see a couple people whose brains have exploded. You're okay. It'll be okay. I want you to be able to make images like the one on the right without any kind of editing. Okay? You can do it. We're going to talk about dark rooms. This room has a completely black vaulted ceiling with like poles in it, and the walls are a dark gray, and the wall behind the head table is a black marble. That's fun. We're going to talk about uplighting and how to use it to make images look awesome instead of like someone is ill. We're going to talk about how to use Flash in a natural way where no one can ever guess you used Flash, especially for you portrait photographers. We're going to talk about multiple light setups, and we'll do it slowly so you can see the difference that one more light adds every step of the way. We'll talk about situations like this and how you can use the most of every venue you're in. We're going to talk about situations like this where you can seek out secret places to do cool images that no one else has thought of. That's about it. I want to be able to teach you Flash. I want you to feel confident with Flash, and I want you to stop feeling intimidated and irritated when you use Flash. I want you to think less about light and more about composition, more about making cool images, more about finding cool moments, and less stress, you guys. We got enough of it. We don't need more. A couple people are asking if I move lights. Yep, I sure do. I move them whenever, like for example, I'll set up for speeches. When the speeches are done, I'll set up for dance floor, and then I sit down and eat for an hour. Being able to be mobile with your situation is good, but it's definitely not intimidating. It doesn't have to be a whole big process. Like I said, my goal is to get you to the point where it's done intuitively, where you just know what to do. You don't have to stop and see a chart or a printout. I don't show you static setups of put light here because that's not helpful. I don't want you to memorize something you have to try to remember every weekend. I want you to feel intuitively what you need to do and feel really comfortable doing Maria, you absolutely can do it by yourself. I still shoot weddings sometimes where I'm alone, and that works fine. You just have to give yourself the patience to be able to learn how to do it. The only benefit really of having an assistant is that I don't have to physically go do it. I can like stay and like eat my food while she's setting up. But if you do it by yourself, you can absolutely do it. I see some people saying they submitted their form. I'm so excited about that, you guys. Please keep me in mind in the future, and feel free to sign up for my emails on my website there if you'd like to just kind of think about it for a little bit first. And like I said before, please email me, even if you just have a simple question, even if you're wondering, is this right for me? I'm not really sure if it fits, let me know. If you know somebody, or maybe you are somebody who hasn't even gotten started with Flash, please especially call me then. If you get with me in the beginning, I will be able to save you so much stress. I will tell you exactly what to get, exactly what to do, so that you don't have to unlearn bad habits later. Any other final questions before we wrap up? I'm going to give it a couple of seconds in the chat here. Looks like everybody's feeling good. So I'm really, really excited to be able to talk to you guys, and I hope that you're all doing well, and I will talk to you soon.
And thank you so much, Heather. Before we hop off, I just want to let you know, I appreciate you coming on here and sharing all this so much. I submitted your form. so please just keep an eye out for that. But like that, it's just beautiful. It's so beautiful and amazing. I was taking some photos of some examples you showed on the screen and like texting it to my husband. Like, hey, this is what we're gonna learn. We're gonna learn this. He's like in the other room. He's just like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, I guess we can do that. That looks cool. Yeah, all right. But yeah, no, thank you so much for coming on here and doing this. It's really inspiring, and definitely makes like the struggle of like getting over like the fear of Flash, I feel like totally worth it to really try to get over. So thank you so much, Heather. This was so good. And I guess if you guys want to dig into anything that she said and catch the replay, she's going to be sending me the link to put the replay up on the replay page very soon. So I will send out an update once that's up. And if you guys know anyone that could definitely benefit from it too, make sure you send them the link to sign up for Coffee Chat so that way they can catch the replay as well. And Thursday is going to be Janelle Joy talking about defining like your editing style and achieving consistency in your editing. So it's another one that's more like hands-on with your actual like photography skills rather than just the business side of things, which is really, really exciting. I'm excited to have more of that. So are you guys hopping off? Hope everybody has a lovely Tuesday. Bye. And Donna, before I actually hang up, she does. Check out her website, and she has a mailing list that you can sign up for. All right, everyone. Bye.